I want to thank you, Laura, again, and all the folks here for making this happen. This is great. I was in those chairs not too long ago, looking up at the presenters where I am right now. So it's kind of cool to be up here, having been sitting where you all are at not too long ago. And so the story I want to tell you all today is the story about local catch, how we started, what was the impetus, and what we're really trying to do to facilitate change. We see the solution as being something that's very complex, as we all know, but something that requires more than just the individual, but the community. And so local catch was sort of built on that concept, right? That we needed to have a community effort. And I think there's no better place to talk about building community, especially around seafood, around the marine environment, than here in Monterey. And in fact, actually, the first meeting that we had to actually get interest with local fishermen was again in this room right here in 2009. So there's a lot of history here that you all are taking part of. So local catch started as an idea. I was over in New England at the New England Fishery Management Council working on herring management. And while I was there, and I'm not sure if any folks here from New England, but yeah, right. The fishing culture there is strong, and that's putting it modestly. The roots of our country were founded in fisheries. I don't know if anyone's read Mark Kurlansky's book, Cod, or Menhaden. I forget who wrote that book, but that was a great book as well. The most important fish of the sea. Anyways, our country was founded on fisheries, and going over there and experiencing that and learning about the fishing culture and the history, the heritage there, I came across some very innovative fishermen. And there are folks up in Maine and some folks in Gloucester, but they had created this concept of the community-supported fishery, which is not too far off from the concept of community-supported agriculture program, which I'm guessing all of you here are familiar with. But if you're not, it's a subscription service where you buy into a farm and you support that farm to do the right thing. And you support them to be organic, you support them to grow seasonal products, to not use pesticides, those sorts of things. And for the fishermen in New England, this idea was very, very attractive because they were competing on a global market. And on the global market, they were not unable to meet those prices. And their fishing communities, their fishing livelihoods, their culture was quickly disappearing. And the only way in which they could see themselves actually surviving was to actually form a stronger community of people to support them. And what that meant was that they were going to cut out the middlemen. They were going to get product direct to consumer. They were going to give them a better price, and the fishermen were going to get a better price. And it was going to be a win-win-win situation for everybody. Fishermen would continue to have their livelihoods. Consumers would get the freshest product available, right? And then you'd build a community to support that. And so when I saw that, and having been here studying fisheries, studying seafood, studying marine conservation, and specifically going to the folks out on Fisherman Wharf 2 and learning about their problems, their issues, and their dying industry, I realized that there was something there, that there was something that I could bring from New England back to here, to Monterey, to start something similar, to rebuild our local fisheries, to rebuild a sense of community around our local seafood, to bring something that meant more, to make seafood more than just our decision to go to the grocery store and have salmon, chicken, or beef. It was a decision now to get fish because that fish had a story attached to it, because it was attached to a fisherman's livelihood. It was attached to the culture, the rich culture of this community, that it was more than just a piece of protein, it was an experience. And so when he came back here in 2010, we put together a business plan with some folks in Monterey Institute. I was not a business student, but I found some business students. I was studying environmental policy, and put together a team of folks to look into the prospect of doing this. And so we went out, we did surveys, we hung out at Safeway, we hung out at Safe Mart for hours at a time, doing all the market research to find out if actually people had those values, if people wanted to have weekly distribution of local seafood. And The overwhelming response was, yes, we want that. And I think actually you all could probably experience or share that sort of excitement, because when you do go to the markets, when you do go to the restaurants, when you do go to grocery stores, you'll find it incredibly difficult to find local seafood. And that's because of this very long, convoluted, complex seafood supply chain that we were just told about earlier. And so this was, an effort to change that, to disrupt the system, to come up with a new solution that will allow us to simplify the problem. And by simplifying the problem, maybe find something that maybe we could replicate. Maybe we could, explore and see if there's ways in which we could always know where our fish was coming from, right? The staggering statistic is that 90% of the seafood that we consume in this country is imported. It comes from boats like this, illegally fishing in other countries' waters. A lot of it's, 40% of that's is mariculture, aquaculture. A lot of it has antibiotics, growth hormones, those sorts of things that we don't want in our bodies, but the seafood supply chain is dictating otherwise, right? And so on the other end that as well is that we have fishermen's livelihoods that are at risk. We've got fishermen in this country who are making less, on average, $25,000 a year. Their employment is going down at 6%. This is all labor statistics here. So our fishing industries are in trouble. And unless we address that, unless we're able to connect with those guys and bring them into the conversation, work with them, build that sense of community, then we really end up losing not just the fish, but we lose the culture. We lose the history, and we lose that sense of what this country was founded on, right? So I left, and I went and did some work in Indonesia, came back. People were still talking about this idea. We hadn't even launched it. People were still talking about it. It was just an idea. There's a glimmer in the sky, right? And came back, and people are still talking about it. There's that buzz, right? People are buzzing about this, both on the fisherman side of things, and the consumers were like, hey, we still want local seafood. Are you going to do that? And I realized that I had started something much bigger than myself, right? And that I sort of now had a responsibility to see this through. And so, finding folks to work with, continued the mission, and actually launched the business in 2012. And we started January 17th with 140 members, and to create that awareness, to create that buzz, to get people signed up, and to get that 147 members, we actually started signing people up before we even touched the fish. We actually, worked with magazines. We worked with Seafood Watch. We worked with all these different groups, Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, to get the word out that there are folks that wanted to try this out, and we wanted people to commit, to say, hey, we're going to do this. If you guys start, we're going to make this happen. We're behind you. And that's what we did. We got a list of 400 folks, and we realized that probably all 400 of those people, weren't going to sign up, that maybe half would sign up. And we got a little bit less than half, 147. That was a great start. And now we're at, 420 members, and currently doing distribution for about 350 because a lot of people are on hold. It's the holidays, those sorts of things. But moving on, the idea, again, was to take this complex and long supply chain where there's all sorts of mislabeling. 1/3 of the seafood that's been in this supply system, Ocean, I think, did the study, has been found to be mislabeled. That is, we just don't know what it is, whether it's illegally harvested, whether it's sustainable or not. So even as a consumer, if you go ask those questions, they might not give you the right answers, and that's really troubling. And so in this greater conversation of what Local Catch was trying to do is we're looking at the environment. We're using Seafood Watch guidelines as our base for the environmental standards that we establish. We work with local fishermen, and we find out sort of what are their needs. What's the infrastructure here that allows them to be successful? What sort of money do they need to be making? What are the species that are valuable for them, that they need to catch to make a living? And then we work with the consumer, and I have to say, if we're going to heavily weight on any one of these three things, it was going to be on the consumer side of things, and because we have such strong engagement, and because we're more like a buyer's club, actually. We have a group of people that have basically contracted us as local catch to go out there and find that fish for them, to find that fish that they really desire, to find that local seafood. And the reason why I think it's really important to bring this all together and to see this whole picture here, from the Big Sur coastline here to, the whales out in the bay, to Frank Aliotti, our squid fisherman up there, to Jack and Danny and their son Kai, their family they're in Hawaii right now, but they're COS folks. So anyways, the reason why it's so important to bring those people together, because in that convoluted supply chain, there's just so much unknown. There's so many question marks. And if we can get everyone together to actually have these conversations together, we can actually answer a lot of those questions. And the answer that we saw with local catch and the answer that we're trying to promote, if we're going to say there's one mission that we have here, is to promote local sustainable seafood, because we believe that no matter if you're an environmentalist, if you're in the industry, or if you're a consumer, we should all agree that we want local sustainable seafood. It should be the common ground that we can all start and have this conversation and decide what is really sustainable. What is it that we demand, or what do we need in our community? Because it's not just seafood. Again, it's the culture, it's the heritage, it's the economics. And so, to give you an example, there's a great article that just came out about our work and work with the San Francisco Community Fishing Association. They just came out in big industry news called Pacific Fishing, and I took their article and I turned it into a slide like yesterday because it just came out. But the idea was work with this fisherman here. Candy is his nickname, which is I think a pretty cool nickname. But he's a drag fisherman up in San Francisco Bay. He catches halibut, and he's part of this co-op up in San Francisco called the San Francisco Community Fishing Association. And these co-ops are emerging throughout the country. It's in fact one of the only ways in which fishermen are able to support themselves, both at an economic level but also on a political level. Similar to sort of what local catch is, but this is more on a wholesale distribution side of things. So this is actually plugging into the businesses and the distributors that are moving, thousands of tons of product. But we approached them, we're like, hey, we want some of your local product. We want that local halibut. Our members want that local halibut, right? So we got that local halibut from him. That's myself with Larry Collins. Larry Collins runs the Community Fishing Association. We trucked that seafood down to Scotts Valley. We're in a restaurant. We processed it, cut it all, portioned it all, wrapped it all by hand. And then we packed it into coolers and we sent it out for distribution. And that's Jack there picking up his share over at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. And this is his son prepping dinner, getting that halibut ready to get thrown on the stove. And the cool thing about this is there's a story here that when Jack talks to Kai about seafood, he can tell him where that seafood came from. He can tell him about the sustainability of it. He can have that conversation with his child and let him know that that fish just came from right out here. When you walk to the beach, they're walking along the beach, they can say, hey, that halibut was caught here, right? There's significance in that. And there's a greater conversation that happens, an educational opportunity. Again, we're not so much about the seafood as we are about the story, the experience, the ability for people to see and experience their seafood, knowing where their seafood is coming from, because it's remarkably different than going to the grocery store and picking it up there and not knowing. And this is all because we simplify the supply chain. This is all because we take out all the middlemen, we take out all the confusion, and we just say, hey, let's just make this something that's tangible that we can all work together and understand. So what does that look like when we're engaging our customers? Because again, as I said, that's our strong point. To start, we send out newsletters every Monday before the delivery comes out on Tuesday. And in that newsletter, is the story about the fish, who caught it, where it came from, how it was caught, how old it is, when did that fish get landed. And then we also talk about the science, how is the health of that stock? We get into the nitty gritty if people want to go there. We provide all the links. We'll do videos. I'll actually go out on the boats with these fishermen, and I'll take videos of these guys long lining, or salmon fishing, right? So that people can actually experience their fish being caught. We can actually say, hey, you see that fish that just got pulled out in that YouTube video? One of you got that fish. And that's a very powerful thing. And then we do events. So, this is an event that we've been doing called the Indie Series or Indie Marketplace, Indie Pop-Up Dinner now. Has anyone been to this event? I highly recommend it. First Thursday of the month, it's a gathering of all local food providers. The ticket's now like $35 a plate, but it's all inclusive. It's, pickles and cheeses and breads and fish from us and all sorts of, sometimes pork from the Pig Wizard. There's just all kinds of local food. But we're super blessed to be here, by the way. If you haven't all figured it out already, we live in the best place if you're a foodie. And so we fit in really nicely with these folks because these are people that are once a month getting together and celebrating, local foods. Anyways, and then when we're done with, our distribution, people have had their meals. Once a month, we send out a survey and we just say, hey, let us know how that was for you. How did you enjoy that fish, right? Was it enough for you? Was it fresh enough for you? How does it compare to other markets where you've gotten it? And then once a year, we ask them even more in-depth questions. And this is something that actually we're working with the Center for Ocean Solutions with to develop these criteria and these questions that allow us to assess the sustainability of our business from not just the environmental level, but from the social level, from the economic level, right? That allow us to see, what are our impacts and are we getting better at what we're doing? And those questions are like, what does sustainability mean to you, right? We ask our members, we start from the grassroots, we start from the bottom. What does that mean for you? We ask them, what does local mean for you, right? That lets us know where we can source our fish. And so by involving the consumer in that way, we're able to really bring about a greater conversation that makes them feel more inclusive, to be able to help make those decisions that are incredibly difficult to make. Let's see here. And in the end, this is incredibly important because we're talking about wild fish here. And we're talking about one of our last connections to nature, to the ocean, that's really fundamental in our existence here on Earth. If we lose that connection, there's not very many other things that we have that connect us to nature in this way. And so in that way, I think we're trying to start something bigger, trying to get people to think about the ways in which we connect to the nature, to wild fish, to whatever it is, because it's so critical, especially at this time, as we already know. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I know I probably went over a couple minutes. A minute? All right. I hope that minute was worth it.